Good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of the African American Task Force Safety and Justice Subcommittee. I'm the committee chairman, State Representative Nnamdi Chukwuka. I would like to thank you all for joining us for your participation this afternoon. We'll begin our agenda with our first item, which is attendance. May I ask staff to take the attendance?
Yes. Representative Nnamdi Chukwuka.
Present.
Kyle Myers. Gilmore Crosby.
Present.
Tynietta Congo. Spencer Price. James Sherrard. Dr. Karen Holland.
Present.
Dr. Michelle Radcliffe. Dr. Tana Connell. Lisa Minatola.
Present.
James Diana.
Present.
Chief Deputy AG Alex Mackler.
Present.
Dr. Julius Mullen. Captain Fahim Akil. Representative Sharia Moore.
Did we meet quorum?
Not as of right now. I think we only have 6 members present.
Thank you. So I will ask that members, we all receive the minutes, if we can review them, and if there are any corrections, please note them. And when we have a quorum, we will come back to acceptance of the minutes. We will proceed with the next agenda item. Our first agenda item of presentation for today for reentry presentations will be Dr. Deborah Mason of the Hope Commission and Deputy Chief of Planning, Ms. Jessica Klein of DOC.
What happened?
You are permitted to share your screen for the presentation.
Everyone see that?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Is it split or is it the whole screen?
It's split right now.
Okay. I have double monitors, so I apologize, everyone.
Yes.
It's the wonderful world of technology. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to share this like this, if y'all don't mind.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. So hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Deborah Mason. I currently work with the Wilmington Hope Commission. I am the Deputy Executive Director here. And today I'm just going to walk through the Hope Commission, what we do here, and just talk a little bit about our wraparound services and how we address some of the issues we have here and how we approach the issue of being really focused on trauma. So first and foremost, what do we do here? When individuals come in, we address any issues that they may have. Let's back up a little bit. How they refer to us. They refer to us through the Department of Correction or self-referrals. When an individual is incarcerated, we have an InReach coordinator who will go into the prison, who will talk to them. If they have time left on probation, if they have a year or more, then they can come to our program. We only take moderate or high level offenders. We only deal with males. And we prefer to stay in the zip codes of 19801, 802, and 805, because those are the most at-risk zip codes in the city of Wilmington. We do have case managers We do assessments on the individuals. We try to do a continuum of care, meaning that we provide support services in regards to behavioral health, family reunification, workforce development. We do have programs here that helps them with computer training, with Excel, developing PowerPoints, different things like that. We are in the process of working with West End in developing a GED program where the individuals will actually come to the Hope Commission and do the program online. So we will give access to laptops here. They will come here. It's through a program called Schoology. Once a month, we will have a tutor come in and work with the gentleman. And it's not just for our members, it will be for the community at large as well. We have a peer support specialist that works with the gentleman. And that's like one of the key things of our program, because what we find is that the gentlemen are often more likely to talk to him than they are to their case manager or clinical director or myself or executive director. And then we have behavioral support services. Like I said, we have a clinical director. She deals with mental health, behavioral health. If they have substance abuse issues, she'll address that as well. So some of the collaborations we have, of course, we work with the Department of Correction very closely in the city of Wilmington. These are fundamental to our success. We do work with other agencies. Like I said, we work with West End. We are working with, right now, we're getting ready to start working with University of Delaware. We are going to have a nurse practitioner come in once a month to do blood pressure. I can't think of what else she's going to do, but she's going to do a lot of different things. And she's going to be able to provide prescriptions to the gentleman and refer them out to other primary care providers if need be. So what we're finding is that our gentlemen are not going to the doctors like they should. And it's not just our gentlemen, it's just this population as a whole. So what we found is if we bring the services to them, they're more likely to engage. So we're going to bring a nurse practitioner into the Hope Commission, and hopefully they're more likely to get those services. So this next Tuesday, we're going to have someone come in to do blood pressure and all those other things. And we're also going to have somebody come in for dental services, because that's also very important. So some of the challenges that we're facing, of course, is the lack of resources and funding. Like, that's huge. And I think that's across the board, especially for nonprofits right now. And the other issue is trauma. And again, I think that's across the board. But the biggest thing with the trauma is the paravases, which I think a lot of people are focusing on adverse childhood experiences. However, the paravases is so important. So the paravases, it deals with adverse childhood experiences as well as adverse community environments, because as we all know, the blight in the city of Wilmington is just through the roof. And the shootings are, the violence is increasing and just different issues. So we really need to address not only the trauma within the individual, but the trauma that's within the environment as well. So this is just an overview of what the paravases looks like. Again, at the top is adverse childhood experiences, which covers maternal depression, emotional sexual abuse, substance abuse, domestic violence, homelessness, physical and emotional neglect, divorce, mental illness, incarceration, and homelessness. And if you talk to anybody in this population, they have experienced many of these different things. However, we are not talking about the adverse community environments: poverty, discrimination, community disruption, lack of opportunity, poor housing quality, affordability, and violence. Across the board, across the city of Wilmington, a lot of people are experiencing this. So not only should we be addressing the adverse childhood experiences, but the adverse community environments. So what I did when I was getting my doctorate is I wanted to really understand how trauma is impacting recidivism, because we have all these wonderful resources. However, if we are not providing individuals the tools to manage these resources, they are going to end up right back in the same situation. So with trauma affects all of our brains in different ways. However, it does alter our memory and our ability to maneuver through stress. So if we have these individuals who are suffering from high levels of trauma and then they're on probation it's going to impact how they're dealing with their probation officer, how they're dealing with their employees, employers, how they're dealing with their family, how they're dealing with stressors overall. And it's going to increase their likelihood of them going back to prison. So what I found was that a lot of individuals who have went through reentry programs have high levels of trauma and they have still went back to jail. And what we're missing is a lot of protective factors for these individuals. They don't have stable environments in the household. They don't have jobs. They don't have strong ties to the community. They have a high number of risk factors. So again, lots of trauma. They don't have, strong ties to the community, which is a risk factor. And then the intervention strategies that we're doing is not consistent across the board. So what I mean by that is that the individuals need to experience the same thing in the prison, outside of the prison. And that's one of the things that the Hope Commission does very well. We have an InReach coordinator who goes inside of the prison and starts the InReach and engages with them, and then that follows them on the outside. So the same person that goes in to talk to them is the same person they're going to see on the outside as well, which is one of the reasons why we're very successful. And then we have this new thing that has taken off and is doing very well. It's wonderful. It's called Hope for the City. And I just want to talk about why the Hope Commission is so successful. All of our staff is trauma informed. And according to the CDC, what is considered trauma informed? An environment needs to be safe, which the Achievement Center is one of the safest environments in the city of Wilmington. We do not allow the probation officers to come in here and arrest individuals here. We don't allow chaos to come in here, or we have a secure facility. So, individuals have to be buzzed in. Individuals know when they come here, they are safe. We're all trustworthy. It's very transparent here. We have peer support. We collaborate with the individuals. We empower them. We want to we want them to have a voice. And we are very aware, of cultural issues, historic issues, and gender issues. We assess the members' trauma levels. We do that immediately. Our clinical director does that immediately. We provide a protective factor in the sense that, I just talked to a gentleman today who was having some issues at home, and we talked through it. And throughout the week, I have talked to several young gentlemen who are having issues with, girlfriends or friends, and we have talked through it. And we don't realize how important it is to have a positive person in our life to talk through issues. That's a protective factor. So just having somebody that you can go through and run things by and say, hey, like, what am I doing here? Or can you help me with this? That is a protective factor. And that is something that we give to the individuals here. We do address risk factors if they are not employed. That's a risk factor. If they don't have education, we address that. If they don't have housing, we address that as well. And then we begin the intervention while the member is in prison, and then we provide wraparound services upon their release. And that is it, sir. Is there anything else that you would like me to cover today?
I did have a couple questions. Or you mentioned certain zip codes. Have there been any discussions about expansion?
There have been, and we don't just take individuals from 19801, 802, and 805. If a person wants to come into our program from 720 from Newcastle and they have transportation, we will bring them into the program. The issue is we don't want to set anybody up for failure. So
Dr. Mason?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
I don't know what happened. But if the individual has transportation, we will take them from Newcastle and from Newark. But like I was saying, if the transportation is a big issue, so if a person can't get here, then the likelihood of them going back to prison isn't going to increase because they can't get to the program. So that's where we really we want them to be successful.
And how many your InReach coordinators do you have or counselors?
We have one InReach coordinator and we have 2 case managers. And we are definitely trying to expand that.
Okay. Has there also been any thought about adding, I guess, different programming for the females in terms of gender-specific supports for the females?
There has been. I am very, very focused on that. I do want to do that. However, we are doing what we are doing very, very well. So as of right now, we're going to stay where we are. And hopefully down the line, that is something that we can do. But we have discussed it.
Okay, excellent. I'm not sure if there are questions from other members of the subcommittee. All right. Don't see any. So thank you very much, Dr. Mason. Appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Ms. Klein?
Hello, good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jessica Klein. I'm the Deputy Chief of Planning, Research, and Reentry at the Department of Correction. Briefly, my background, I've been here just about 25 years, with most of that being in probation and parole. And then about 2 years ago, I came to the administration building as the Director of Reentry and have since promoted to Deputy Chief. So I am happy to share with you all about Reentry and DOC. Before I pull up this slide, I will say, after talking with the representative, I felt like maybe this was a good opportunity to really kind of get in the weeds about what we do on the ground level. So I wanted to spend most of my time on that. But I will say, just as an overall point, the Delaware Correctional Reentry Commission has recently relaunched again. If anyone recalls, from Executive Order 27 in 2018, Governor Carney issued a set of deliverables based on reentry reforms. And over the course of 2 years, we were able to meet those deliverables. And there are reports out on the progress there. And it was really a lot of setting the foundation for future reforms, really some structure for reentry reforms. And then we spent about a year developing new deliverables, our next set. And then just this year, we're kicking off sort of our DCRC 2.0. And that new recidivism reduction blueprint is also available if anyone is interested in reading what we're going to be working on the next 3 years at like a higher level. But for today, I wanted to get into what we're doing kind of ground level to actually give the direct supports to the individuals leaving our custody. So let me see if I can share my screen here. And let's see. Hopefully that works. If everyone can see that. There we go.
We can.
Okay, wonderful. So, and I'm pulling this slide. So for anyone that's interested or that wants to know more about Department of Correction in general, we have a YouTube page that has a series of webinars. So DOC has been hosting webinars every other month for, I believe since June. And they are all available for viewing on our YouTube channel as well. And the extended version of what I'll show you today is also on there. Our first webinar was Reentry in Delaware. So I'm pulling some of the information from there to share with you today. So when we talk about reentry in Delaware, in DOC, we have a lot of different, I'll call it lanes of reentry services that we're offering. And when we think about reentry, it's really referring to the prison population. So people that have been incarcerated for a year or more. And so when we developed all of these reforms and we're identifying our target population, we target our reentry efforts towards males sentenced to a year or more and females sentenced to 6 months or more, level 5, 4, or a combination. So we took some liberties with the prison definition for females. There just wasn't that many females if we did a year or more. We weren't providing services to that many females. There's just so few that would meet that criteria. So we wanted to be able to provide supports to more females. So that is our sentence criteria for one of our reentry lanes. Like Dr. Mason said, moderate to high risk, right? So that's evidence-based. We want to throw as many resources as possible at our moderate to high risk population. And then we begin reentry planning. So once the individuals are sentenced into our custody, they're eligible for reentry. They score moderate to high risk. We're starting from the door working on their release. So in the prisons, we have correctional counselors, and they have a variety of duties that you can see here, not all of which are related to reentry, and some of them are. The assessments, the initiating the discharge plan, we call it the transition accountability plan, helping secure Social Security card applications, et cetera. So with that being said, correctional counselors having a variety of other responsibilities related to the person's incarceration. Probation and parole has dedicated InReach coordinators to help out. So there's 4 InReach coordinators throughout the state that are probation and parole officers whose sole assignment is to help our returning citizens with their discharge plans. So they start working with the person prior to release, roughly in that 4 to 6 month range prior to release. They help find housing. They're able to link the person with clothing or food upon release if needed. They can link them to education and employment resources in the community. We can connect them to, we have both long-term and short-term case management providers that also offer peer supports as well. Well, I have present workshops in level 5 facilities. This is pre-COVID. Hopefully we'll get back to them soon. They were extremely helpful. And actually Achievement Center would come in periodically too and talk to the folks when we were able to bring people from throughout the facility into a centralized place and really present different topics to them prior to release to give them as much information as possible. And then we can also, when we have the funding available, we are able to leverage some federal grant funds in the past, and we've paid for bus passes, IDs, birth certificates, up to 1 month's rent. I mean, that money comes and goes, but when we have it, we try to make the most effective use out of that. We also have Centurion reentry coaches. So this is our medical and behavioral health vendor. So they have a different criteria. So sometimes we overlap with the probation and parole, but their services are not contingent on sentence length. So their services are more contingent on the person's circumstances at the time. So if someone has been incarcerated just 30 days, and they have a serious medical condition, behavioral health, substance use disorder, any kind of disability, they will be eligible for Centurion discharge planning services as well. So in the event that they also meet the reentry criteria, we have a really large team helping out. In the event they don't, if they don't have that length of sentence, we still have the Centurion team helping those with these significant medical and behavioral health conditions. And what they do is help us facilitate enrollment in Medicaid, assist in housing placement, especially as it relates to medical and behavioral health care issues, schedule appointments. We can schedule, they'll schedule primary care appointments, follow-up substance use appointments, mental health intakes, whatever appointments the person needs post-release. They can help start the long-term care process, the eligibility and enrollment unit application, and the DDDS services. They can initiate that too. They also submit referrals for transitional reentry services, including transportation, and they can aid in the submission of Social Security disability and Social Security insurance applications. And they also can help arrange for hospice care for those individuals leaving custody that are in need of that. So this kind of shows the three different areas where discharge planning can happen. And sometimes it's all three, sometimes it's one, sometimes it's two. It really depends. So we have probation and parole InReach, right? The prison population. So they're really looking at those criminogenic needs. And Dr. Mason sort of addressed that, talking about assessments and identifying those factors that make the person high risk to recidivate. We look at programs and recommendations for pro-social activities, to referrals to treatment and services. We want to address the special conditions of probation, try to ensure individuals have a 90-day housing plan upon release, and encourage family engagement and pro-social supports. Whereas Centurion, they're going to pick up a lot of scheduling, appointments for MAT for those with opiate use disorder, connections to the promise services for people with severe mental health issues, benefits, like I said, those some of those long-term care applications, Social Security, and they'll work on housing related to behavioral health and medical. And what I don't have a specific slide on this, but if we're just to kind of focus for 1 minute on the opiate use disorder, the Department of Correction has greatly expanded our medication-assisted treatment options within DOC. So medication-assisted treatment is available at all of our level 5 and 4 facilities. And this is all the options. So Suboxone, Vivitrol, Methadone. So if someone comes into custody and they are currently on MAT in the community, they can continue that while incarcerated. If they are incarcerated and are not on MAT, and that could be helpful to them and they choose to get on it, they can initiate it while they're at DOC. So that is an ever expanding program, and it's sort of the gold standard for opiate use disorder treatment. And Centurion also has dedicated case managers at some of our facilities that only discharge plan for those individuals with severe opiate use disorder. So there is, we do have a number of people with opiate use disorder that come in and out of our facilities, and oftentimes they're there for short periods. They might come in on a charge and then they're out in a few weeks. So we have at a few of our facilities, we have opiate use disorder coaches where they will identify those cases and they'll triage from the highest risk on down. So anyone with a recent overdose on MAT currently, anything like that, and they'll discharge plan for those people, even if they're only there for a short period of time. And then we have our medical discharge planning. So for individuals that have chronic medical conditions, they see a discharge nurse prior to release, and should be released with 30-day supply of medication, follow-up appointments. They get educated on their medications. Hopefully we have prescriptions for any necessary medical equipment that they may need in the community, and a connection to their managed care provider. So if they are on Medicaid, that we can connect them with their care providers of their managed care organization. So the transitional reentry services, I sort of mentioned these before. These are services that are available immediately upon release. So from the gate, individuals leaving prison, if we have an indication that they need transportation from the prison to a location, and usually this is for those sort of high risk, like individuals that might be going to inpatient treatment, sober living, have an appointment for a mental health intake, or other kind of vulnerable adults or releases that may need a direct connect from point A to point B. So we have a contract with Delaware Center for Justice who provides these services. They have peer support, so they can pick people up from the gate at the prison and take them directly to where they need to be. They also can help apply for Medicaid and food stamps, or finish that application process if it was already started, help them get other vital documents, provide them additional supports. And then if they need longer term case management, they can transition them to that as well. So one of the significant improvements we've had in the last few years is the switch from Delaware being a termination state to a suspension state for Medicaid. So this means that individuals that are incarcerated that have Medicaid, they go into an incarceration status as opposed to having their benefits terminated. So this makes it significantly easier to have their benefits turned back on post-release, usually within 24 to 48 hours. We have data exchanges nightly behind the scenes that help us know who's incarcerated, who gets out, and those things sort of happen automatically. We can also take applications for individuals that don't have Medicaid while they're still incarcerated. And then the managed care providers that are, the Medicaid managed care providers have care planners that can also assist us if there's any discharge planning challenges related to, insurance needs. So if they need to know a provider or help getting certain equipment or need an appointment scheduled, if they do have Medicaid, their managed care coordinator can help with that. And then immediately upon release, we have a process in place where they can call and activate their food benefits. The food benefit application requires a telephone interview. So the person leaving is given the information on how to do that. And if they are a beneficiary of the Transitional Reentry Services, usually the peers will help them call kind of as they're taking them from the prison to wherever they're going to kind of speed that process up for food benefits. A couple other initiatives we have is a few years ago, all 5 housing authorities and Department of Correction and Delaware Center for Justice created the Family Reentry Program. And this allows recently released individuals to reunite with families living in assisted public housing authority properties, right? So if the housing authority owns the property and the person coming out of incarceration has a family member that lives there, they can actually apply to live there. I'll say, use the word legally, right? So they can actually be on the family's, well, they're there as a guest. It's a pilot program, so they could stay as a guest with their family, and it will not negatively impact the family. So the family is, they're safe, their lease is safe, and the person can live there. And then if they successfully complete their term with them, then they can actually get added to the lease. So this is a really promising program. And I have a slide about challenges. And one of our challenges has been really getting people enrolled in this. And I'm not sure if it's an issue of maybe most of the housing is private landlord and voucher and not actually owned by the housing authority, or if there's other reasons, but this program does exist and we're really hoping to gain some traction with it. We have a variety of services available at probation and parole once they're released. Most of these I already went over. They'll have, most of the offices have food pantries, hygiene products, clothing closets can help apply for benefits, social service supports, housing assistance, substance abuse and mental health screenings. We partner with Division of Health and Social Services. Their community support unit is located at a few of our offices as well. And we also have the credential card that is SB 171. I'm sure everyone has heard of that. And that helps our individuals leaving custody get an ID and a birth certificate if they were born in Delaware. So upon release, anyone that has served 6 months or more at 5 or 4 will get a credential card that will help them get an ID or birth certificate at no cost to them upon release. So, challenges. Obviously, there's always challenges with discharge planning, right? So one of our biggest challenges is unexpected or unplanned releases. And these come in a variety of forms, but you'd be surprised how many people are sort of unplanned or unexpected releases. So we do our best. And then if we need to, we will try to circle back post-release to finalize those plans. Challenges for individuals leaving our custody that are chronically ill, that require a high level of medical care in the community. There is virtually no nursing home level of care in the community for individuals leaving our custody. It is extremely rare that a nursing care facility will accept someone coming out of our facilities that may need nursing home level of care. So that is a really large challenge for us. In that same vein, there is finding housing for people with severe mental illness. And there are some resources, but it is quite a challenge for that as well. There's probably more demand than supply, I think. And then in general, the shortage of affordable housing, right? So there are a lot of sober living houses in Delaware. There's some other housing, but to find housing that someone can afford weekly just coming out of incarceration is pretty difficult, right? So, you know, affordable housing, being able to connect the person to that housing. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, we're not able to hold someone incarcerated simply because they don't have a home. So we really put a lot of effort prior to release in trying to find some type of shelter upon release. So we do not want to release people to unsheltered homelessness to the extent that we can avoid that. You know, we have limited reentry staff. You know, we do the best we can. Obviously more staff though, because ideally in a perfect world, we would be able to discharge plan for every single individual leaving our custody. That's just not realistic right now, but we do try to triage those highest risk and most vulnerable. And one of the big pieces that we're really working on, and I'm very encouraged to see that it seems to be the theme. I know that Dr. Mason mentioned that the Achievement Center is working on it. I know that the ODS just hired a community engagement specialist. So I think there's really a lot of this engaging the support system in the community. That family re-engagement is a big piece that we are really trying to focus on in the next, you know, in the coming months. Like this is a piece that we identify that is really important, and we're really encouraged that we all seem to be on the same page, all the different providers, as well as DOC. We have an understanding that this is something that deserves some attention. So that is what I have in a nutshell, if there are any questions.
I greatly appreciate the presentation. I did have a couple questions. One in regard to the 4 InReach coordinators. And I also recognize you're saying limited staff. I'm just wondering on that same token, how effective we are with just 4. And I guess if that was the challenge you were mentioning with limited staff.
So when we're looking at the prison population and the number of releases per month, you know, that is manageable with the population that they are responsible for. So the PMP InReach coordinators are responsible for those leaving our prison system. I think the challenge is when we're looking at really expanding to everyone, right? So Centurion has a number of staff, but they really have their hands full with the severely mentally ill, substance use disorder, chronic medical conditions. But there is a whole other sort of population, short-term detentioners, other people that might not have those issues, but might have other risks, right? That, you know, are kind of, they're definitely not prioritized, right? So there's no, you know, had we more reentry staff, we could potentially expand Because like I said, ideally everyone, we would discharge plan for everyone in a perfect world, right? So right now, I feel very comfortable with the InReach coordinators and the numbers of releases per month that would meet that criteria. But then when we're looking at sort of under the prison population, so anyone up to a year sentence or just detentioners, more resources there could go a long way.
Thank you. And then the second was in regards to the family reentry program.
Mm-hmm.
Mentioned that I guess the challenges of I guess participation and trying to boost the numbers. Is there I guess an education component or advertising component that goes with this so that families are aware of it?
We have tried, and we circle back to it periodically. And I know the housing authorities, from what they told me, because they have met internally themselves to try to advertise, they've sent mailers to all of their properties at some point, informing them. So, I've heard a lot of thoughts on maybe why we just haven't really been able to kick this off. I think we collectively think that, this would be amazing if people could return to that support system and not be hindered just because it's subsidized housing. So I don't know if it's advertising or if there's an issue that maybe we haven't thought of, but it's always there on the table. We're trying to sort through it to get some traction with that program.
Excellent, thank you. And do you know how many of the coaches that Centurion has?
I can get the specific number. I want to say 7, but I can verify that and email you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Are there any additional questions for Ms. Klein from members of the committee?
Representative, I have a question. This is Alex from the AG's office.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Klein, for the presentation. I don't have any expectation that you answer this on the spot, but I'd be curious when you talk about unexpected releases, if there are ways in which our office, the AG's office, can be doing a better job tracking that stuff and making everybody aware, particularly in the case of violent offenders, their victims. Look, our prosecutors are overwhelmed with their caseloads, and a lot of times it's a case reaches its conclusion, and if the person ends up going to prison, our folks just sort of move on to the next case. But if there are ways that we could be tracking this stuff better and keeping up with DOC and everybody else better to make things a little bit less of a surprise, I'm always interested in ways that we could be improving our own shop.
That's a good question. And it's sort of been on our list of figuring out how to better track. There's so many scenarios that would cause an unplanned or unexpected release. Some of the more common ones are unexpected sentence modifications, which I'm not sure that would really be related to your office. However, often we'll have either level 4 residents or our incarcerated inmates request a modification, and it's granted, and before we know it, the person is out, and sometimes they have nowhere to go or no supports or no way to get there. But it's that kind of communication, like we didn't even know that this modification was in the works. So that happens sometimes.
Yep.
Sometimes it could be a sudden bail modification, which doesn't happen all that often because our interactions with the detentioners is, for the most part, kind of triage to severe opiate use and severe mental health issues. So we're sort of tracking those cases day to day anyway. And sometimes it could be on our end, maybe good time gets applied more than we thought or something, or they're getting out unreleased. But there are a number of unexpected or unplanned releases that often leave us scrambling. The parole cases, commutations, things like that, those are challenging as well. There's really not a good, solid communication relay there for where in the process, if someone is coming up for parole or has a commutation pending, when that might come through, so we can ensure that there's a solid plan in place prior to that actually coming through. That would probably be the biggest challenge for us, is to figure out how we can communicate better with all parties about those cases.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the question. Are there any additional questions for Ms. Klein? Well, thank you, Ms. Klein. Really appreciate the presentation. It was very informative and helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will move to our next presenter, Ms. Eliza Hertz of the Office of Defense Services and the APEX's program coordinators, Ms. Truitt and Mr. Duncan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Give me a moment to go ahead and share. All right, I think we're good to go. So again, good afternoon. I want to take the time to say thank you first and foremost to this task force, the subcommittee, for inviting us into the meeting, and most importantly, for offering us the opportunity to engage in the dialogue, relating to criminal justice reform, reentry initiatives, and just overall second chances. We all share those missions. Just a formal introduction. My name is Dominique Truitt. I serve as the program coordinator for the APEX Pardons and Expungements program here in the Newcastle County area. My colleague, who's also here, Andrew Duncan, he manages our program in the Kent and Sussex locations. And we're also here to present in collaboration with the amazing Ms. Eliza Hertz. She's one of the attorneys with the Office of Defense Services. So collectively, we'll be giving a brief overview of the services we provide. And in addition to that, just some general insight on the pardons and expungement procedures, more so relating to, the criteria, costs, things of that sort. The priority of the presentation, it will focus more on the barriers that exist, which have proven to be major impediments for a majority of the individuals we serve, who are seeking to clear their record and restore their livelihood, especially being out of the system for a good amount of time. We'll also highlight certain barriers that exist. So with those barriers, we'll also offer some proposed solutions. So we'll have a full conversation surrounding that. We've been on the ground for several years, and we're noticing, regardless of someone completing this process, whether it be pro se, whether they're going through our APEX services, whether they're utilizing Office of Defense Services, there's still several roadblocks that exist, and some of these legislative changes can be impactful. Personally, I've been doing this work for almost 9 years now. It doesn't even seem that long. And I've been able to, assist a lot of folks, and we've been successful with getting their pardons and expungements, but there's still several folks that fall through the cracks. And oftentimes it can be simply a result of a procedure that could have been streamlined, a fee that could have been waived, or even just like a deadline that could have been extended. So I digress. We'll get into it. Now, there are two distinct pathways as it relates to clearing one's criminal record. So first you have expungements, and under the expungements, you have different types of the petitions. So you have the mandatory adult expungement petition, you have the discretionary adult expungement petition, and if one has a juvenile record, there's also those applicable mandatory and discretionary expungement petitions that exist. Let me go back one slide, forgive me. It's important that you have our contact information, of course. So like I said, with all of our services, whether it be with myself or Andrew, we do provide one-on-one direct services. We do provide those intake and orientation sessions. I'm sure all of you, especially if you have referrals, if you have questions, we'll make sure that you have our contact information moving forward. Now, just to offer some insight specifically relating to our APEX program. So we've been established in the year 2012. It started down in Dover. They decided to bring it up north in the Newcastle County area in 2013, and that's actually when I came on board. Our mission statement is APEX is dedicated to opening opportunities to individuals with criminal histories who wish to obtain gainful employment and just overall economic mobility. Now, we're funded by the Division of Employment and Training, and we're funded by the Division of Social Services. However, our services are open to the public. You don't have to be a client of the state in order to receive the service. Now, although we're not attorneys, we do not provide legal counsel, we are very hands-on. We provide that one-on-one direct guidance, especially as it relates to, pardons and expungements. And just to quickly elaborate on the service that we do provide, so that includes the intake, that includes the orientation sessions, that includes the one-on-one case management, where we're doing the assessment of one's criminal record. We're determining exactly what they may be eligible for, whether it be a pardon or an expungement. So we come up with that plan, and then we work towards executing that plan to make sure, we're operating and providing best practices to advocate fully on behalf of the client. One thing that I'm personally excited about that I didn't list here is now that we are housed under the employment and training, we're currently working on this program. We're referring to it as the bridge. So all that would really consist of is providing those wraparound services. So in addition to offering the support for pardons and expungements, for those that are Apex clients that walk through our doors, we want to make sure we're also addressing the other needs as well. So we are currently hiring 2 additional individuals to provide, again, those direct wraparound resources, or at least even referral resources. Now, getting to the pardon process, some of you may or may not be familiar, but a pardon, it's an official statement of forgiveness by the governor. Several adult convictions, despite some exclusions, you still have to go through a governor's pardon. A pardon, it's a 2-step process. Now, of course, there's the application process. A lot of times we'll assist with that. But anyone that's applying for pardon, you will be scheduled. It's for a hearing. It's down in Dover, where you have to go in front of a board. The board consisting of 5 members, 3 out of 5 of those board members have to agree to recommend the application to the governor. So that pardon hearing, it is essential. Before the application is reviewed by the governor, they have to receive that solid recommendation from the board. And of course, if the recommendation goes through, the governor takes the time to make that final decision. Now, if one is granted with an unconditional pardon, that means that all their rights, if they were taken away, all those civil rights are restored. So that includes the right to vote, that includes the right to serve on a jury, to own a firearm, or to seek or hold public office. Now, our APEX program, we have our separate set of criteria. It's very similar to the general criteria offered by the state. But just to give you a consensus, to be eligible for a pardon, the convictions have to be in the state of Delaware. They have to be Delaware state level offenses. This is not applicable to federal offenses. It's not applicable to out-of-state offenses. We oftentimes receive the feedback where perhaps our client has a Delaware record and then maybe a PA or Maryland offense, and we have to explain to them that we can only focus on Delaware because every state, of course, has their own set of criteria and protocols. But again, that referral system, oftentimes I'm referring someone to an entity or an organization outside of the state to at least be able to, provide that support in whatever level that we can. Now, also to be eligible for a pardon, the board and the governor is requiring that one has completely been discharged from probation or parole. And then furthermore, in terms of your fees, your restitution, fines, things of that sort, if it's not paid in full, the board will accept that you have a payment plan. You are in good standing, so that's important. You want to make sure you're not in that delinquent status when applying for a pardon. And of course, no pending charges. We tell our clients all the time, if you have anything pending, if you have an upcoming court date, it's illegal for us to assist you. You want to make sure everything is resolved before we move forward with this process. Now, that 3-year stipulation. So for our APEX program, just to be clear, ideally, we're asking that the participant has been out of the system for the last 3 years. So that means they haven't been arrested, they have not been incarcerated, not on probation or parole. The guideline for the board and the governor's office, it's not that you literally have to have been out of the system for 3 years, but just studies show, and just from experience, depending on the severity of the offense, depending on how many charges the individual has, logically, they're going to want to see a good amount of time that have gone by since you've last been in the system. So that timing is a major factor as it relates to actually being successful with this pardon or even the expungement process. Now, in terms of the cost, so for a pardon and the expungement, the first step is typically completing the fingerprints so we can obtain that Delaware state background report, that SBI report. So the cost is $52, again, just for your Delaware state level of report. Now, for pardon, you also have to obtain court records. So the court records that consist of your certified court dockets and sentencing orders. Now keep in mind, and this is where it could also add up, you have to obtain a set of dockets and sentencing orders for each case that resulted in a guilty conviction. So that's why we had that $7 to $45 range, because every court also has separate, variations of their fees as well. And then a mental health evaluation. This is not always required, but in the case of a pardon, if the individual had was sentenced to and served level 5 prison time for certain severe offenses, that would warrant them needing to have this psychological evaluation. So of course, depending on one's health insurance, their out-of-pocket expenses, the providers, even though it's been a challenge to even simply find a provider in this state that offers psychological evaluations, for a pardon, but depending on all of those factors, the cost can vary. So pardon, you have your fingerprint fee, your court record fees, and the psychological evaluation fee. Keep in mind, there is no fee to go through our programs at all, but there are still applicable fees that oftentimes is the responsibility of the client, of that participant. Now for an expungement, again, $52 for that fingerprint fee to obtain the criminal background report. And then for the expungement, remember you have the mandatory application for the adult, that's a $75 fee. And then for the expungement of the Superior Court discretionary, that's a $75 filing fee as well. So that pretty much wraps it up for the procedural process. That wraps it up for the pardons and expungements. I'm going to hand it over to Eliza Hurst so she can speak more to the Office of Defense Services, what they offer, and we'll move forward from there.
Thank you, Dom. It's always wonderful working with you. I'm Eliza Hurst. I am an assistant public defender with the Office of Defense Services, and I head up the post-disposition unit, which was the brainchild of Lisa Minutola and Chief Public Defender Kevin O'Connell to try to do more holistic defense services. So the unit was created in 2021. Right now, it just consists of me and our community engagement specialist, Coley Harris. And Coley does a lot of great work. He actually just began in January, but he's well known in the community. And his purpose is to promote awareness of all of ODS's holistic defense services, get an understanding from the public as to what they need, what would be helpful for them, how can we help improve our relationship with the community, educate the public, and then help people understand some of the collateral consequences of criminal records. And I'm sure most of you are well versed in the collateral consequences of criminal records, but every time I do an expungement, it never ceases to amaze me just how many barriers there are to our clients. I had a client who wants to become a chaplain in his hospital where he's already a pastor, and he can't do that until he gets his record cleared. I have a client who wants to become a foster and adoptive parent and he has very old criminal charges. He can't go forward with the process to even become a foster adoptive parent until he gets his record cleared. I have young people in their 20s who are looking to start their careers or open up new businesses. Same thing. They can't get that step forward until they have their records cleared. So our office is prioritizing expungements right now, and we help a bit with mandatory expungements, usually guiding some people just through the steps they need to take because you don't need a lawyer for that. And we do a lot of specialization in discretionary expungements, both for adults and juveniles. We are also doing a bit of work around pardons, but really I very much rely heavily on my amazing relationship with the Apex team to assist with some of the pardons. But I can just give a couple examples of cases I've worked on recently. So I have two clients who had very, very similar charges or convictions, excuse me. One had two convictions for offensive touching and shoplifting from 2006 and 2008. And another one who had very similar convictions, both disposed of on the same date in court. Now, the one who had the case was where they were disposed of on the same date in court, let's say it was 2010, his shoplifting and his offensive touching were disposed of the same day. I can help him with an expungement. It was a discretionary expungement based on the issues in the case. The other person who called me because she works in childcare, And she had just gotten hired at a new job with better pay and was very excited about the job, but had to go through the required background check process. And her background said she had an old offensive touching and a shoplifting charge, one from 2003, one from 2006, I believe. And I had to call and tell her, I'm really sorry. You actually need to get a pardon because of the way our statute is set up. And the thing that was difficult for her was neither of those convictions had anything to do with her ability to be a child caregiver. She quit her old job to get a better paying job, and now she was out of that job because of these old criminal convictions. The pardon process takes a very long time, and we'll talk about some of those barriers. But so there are some internal inconsistencies right now as to who we can help based on the limitations in the statute. The statute's also fairly complex. So for some certain charges, whether things have been terminated in your favor, like you've gotten a nollie-pros, acquitted, or the charges are dismissed, or if it's possession of marijuana or paraphernalia, those are things that can be expunged immediately. But if you have certain violations, that's potentially you're eligible for a mandatory expungement in 3 years. For other misdemeanors, you're eligible in 5 years. And then for certain felony offenses, you're eligible in 10 years. Then for the discretionary expungements, you're eligible after 7 years for certain offenses or 3 years after other types of offenses. So sort of this sliding scale of timing depending on what the offenses are, which kind of speaks to the idea of having access to legal advocacy for these kinds of cases can be very helpful because there are a lot of, complexities and nuances as to what someone is eligible for. Our office also does some help with commutation. So those are often individuals who have been incarcerated for an extremely long time, and they are looking to be released either because they've served the majority of their sentence or they have some kind of medical issue or other reasons. They've been exemplary in the prison system and have done a lot of work to try to understand what got them into the system to begin with. We also do sentence modifications on occasion. One of our areas of specialty are particularly for those who were sentenced as juveniles and maybe have very lengthy sentences. We know that brains develop at different rates, and adolescent brain development shows that juveniles tend to be more impulsive or are lessened culpability for some of their crimes. And lastly, the other areas that we work on are registry removals and other collateral matters. A quick example of a collateral matter today that SBI was so wonderful to help with is I had a client who just got her certified criminal record back late last week. We were about to finish up her petition for expungement, and her home was condemned due to mold. And so she called me frantically saying, I just had to move. I have a PO box. I'm staying at the Salvation Army, but I can't access the paperwork, so I don't know what to do. If she didn't have an attorney, she probably would have to go through the whole process again to get fingerprinted. But I was able to contact SBI, explain her situation, and they went ahead and just mailed her certified criminal record again. And I don't know if they're going to mail it to me or to her new PO box, but she doesn't have to go through all those steps just so she can get her expungement, especially in light of the stressful situation of having to move abruptly because her house was condemned. Can you go to the next slide, please? Since I've started, I think we've done a great job of trying to make sure that the Office of Defense Services collaborates definitely with Apex. They've been an amazing partner when we do expungement clinics, but we're also working with lots of other organizations like the ACLU, the Delaware Center for Justice, the Way Home. There are lots of Delaware Volunteer Legal Services and some other organizations to try to make sure that we are all coordinating and collaborating. We do these clinics throughout the state so that people can access us and we can meet them where they are. We're also doing some virtual clinics because we found that some people, it's just easier for them. They don't have to take off work or deal with childcare, and they can just log on to a Zoom. We can give them the information they need to get the process started. We're also working on having some different kinds of expungement fairs we actually have one coming up on April 28th at the, I apologize. My dog only wants to bark when I'm on. We're doing an expungement fair on April 28th at the Route 9 Library, which is also in conjunction with a job fair. So we're trying to make this accessible for people, and we're doing office hours. I know Apex has done amazing office hours at public libraries and state service centers pre-COVID, and now we're all trying to start getting back into that so we can meet people at either weekends or evenings to help them. And lastly, we have a Second Chances Coalition, which has some of the groups that I had mentioned earlier, but it also includes the Department of Justice, and we're including the State Bureau of Identification, all these different agencies to start trying to systemically improve this process for all. Next slide, please. So let's talk about some of the barriers we're seeing. And Dominique, Andrew, and I have talked extensively about some of the recommendations that we think might help. And we definitely appreciate this committee listening to us provide some of these explanations for why we think we can move the needle even further to help provide more access. So first, certified criminal records are only valid for a certain period of time, as you can see on our slide. In order to get a mandatory expungement, you usually have to submit your paperwork within 30 days, and then generally speaking, within 3 months, a mandatory expungement is finalized. A discretionary expungement for juveniles and for adults has been tending to take 6 months, a little bit longer during COVID, and pardons can take between a year and 2 years. And if you recall, I mentioned the client who called me wanting to get an expungement for her 2 old charges because she was working in childcare, and I told her, you're gonna need a pardon. She was crestfallen when I told her it could take a year to 2 years for her to be able to access that. So one of the things that we see people struggle with is they may get their certified criminal history and then they have to act pretty quickly, but life sometimes gets in the way or other things happen and their certified criminal histories are no longer valid because the timeframes. So we are hoping that one thing that this committee might consider for some of the recommendations is, could we lengthen the time that certified criminal histories are viable for, or allow for a new free printout? So you've already expended the $52. Could we just get a new printout if the time has elapsed and they're no longer viable? And
Can I add something to that, Eliza?
I'm sorry?
Can I add something to that, please?
Yeah, and I think you're taking over the next slide, so that's perfect timing. Go ahead.
Oh, perfect. So a lot of the 30 days, 45 days, and 90 days, from my understanding, are pretty old, kind of grandfathered in dates that they just kind of kept. Because when you submit a pardon or an expungement, when it goes to the court, they still run it in Delgis. So it's not like, you know, I'm trying to pull a fast one. I got arrested 2 days before the court got my record, and now the court isn't going to know about it. The court's going to know about it. I know, like, the most frustrating part, right now it isn't really an issue, but during COVID, when the mail was slowed down, I had a few expungements sent back because the court wouldn't accept it because the mail took too long to get it to them. So the client did everything they needed to do, and it just didn't get to the courthouse in time. Stuff like that. So those dates, just extending that, or just extending that would be really, really great.
Any thoughts on, I guess, the time frame for extension? I really like the second, printing of it for free, but just thinking about, I guess, possible timelines for extension, because we're saying a year. I'm just wondering what they may look like in terms of us trying to focus on some recommendations, but I really like.
Even the easiest way I would think, and
yes.
Dom or Liza can chime in if they think I'm definitely could be wrong. If they just did one universal date of like 90 days, the pardon and expungements, backgrounds are good for 90 days. Like, that would be a huge help. Because even when clients get their background checks in the mail, a client might qualify for a discretionary expungement of some charges, a pardon of some charges, and a mandatory expungement of some charges. And they get 3 letters saying you have 30 days, 45 days, and 90 days. And it's very confusing to them. Especially if someone was trying to go through on their own, they're gonna have no idea what qualifies for what. So if there was just one set, you have 100 days, you have 90 days. I think that would make it more streamlined and more clear to people.
Thanks.
or the free printout. I know that would solve everything, but I don't know how SBI would be to that.
Mhm.
You want to go to the next slide for me, Dom? Thank you. Okay, so the financial burden going through, Dom kind of already spoke on this a little bit. It does cost $52 to get your background check. It costs $75 to file for a mandatory expungement, $75 to file for a superior court expungement, which is a discretionary expungement. And for, I believe, juvenile expungements sometimes, and for pardons, definitely, someone might need to get a psychiatric evaluation. So there's a list of charges when you go for a pardon, and if you were sentenced to prison for one of those charges, you have to get a psychological evaluation, a doctor or a therapist to say, we don't believe he's a threat to reoffend. And then that gets turned into the board. Insurances don't cover it because it's not a health procedure. There's only a few doctors who are even willing to do it that I found over the last 10 years because of no one wants to say whether someone's a threat to reoffend or not because they're afraid of like a legal blowback against them or just like a name like type of smearing if it ever comes out and that person does reoffend. And the doctors who do it charge, I've seen people charge as little as, I say little loosely, as $300, but the average is probably like $800 to $1,000. So a lot of times when I have a client come in and they fall into that category of needing a psych eval, it's almost sinks the boat right from the jump. Not other people who I've interacted with who needed the psych eval, and it's not all of them, it's not even half or anything like that. But the ones who do, very few actually continue on to get it. So one of the suggestions would be the one free criminal history report or allow free future copies for a year. So you pay the $52 to get your expungement. And then like Eliza said, you lose it, it expires, whatever it may be, you can get another one because you already paid for it that year. That would be extremely helpful. And providing financial assistance for the expungement fees and psychiatric evaluation fees. Really, you can go through the whole expungement process for $127 if you're willing to do just the discretionary expungement and include the mandatory charges on it. But $127 is a lot of money for someone who isn't working and hasn't been working for a period of time. Psychological evaluations, like I said, $1,000. Not many people who are working have $1,000 laying around that they can just use.
And Andrew, if I could chime in just really quick, another advantage of going through one of our entities, one of our programs, is that we are able to advocate and we're able to share the resources. But imagine the individuals that are coming just, on their own, doing this on their own. They don't even realize that resources such as Superior Court offering waivers are accessible to them as well. So since there's a lack of information or shared information, it would be ideal if there was just, some uniform, streamlined process that rectifies everything. And I have to give credit where credit is due to Lisa, who's here now. And I love the idea of offering. And she said, just as we are all, guaranteed one free credit report, why can we not just get one free criminal background report, one free certified background report? So that would eliminate that burden as well. But yeah.
And that actually solves two problems because I think it ends up being on the next slide. I've been doing this since 2012. I've done, I want to say just over 1,500 of these. Very few people who I've met with have a good understanding of what's on their background check. People have a general thought process, and it makes sense that if I'm arrested and I beat the charges, that's not going to show up in my record. If I'm arrested and I took a plea, everything I took a plea to get away from isn't going to show up in my record. And that's not the case. Almost everyone who I deal with who doesn't have severe charges, someone has severe charges, they tend to have seen their record before. But people who've had, multiple misdemeanors or one really bad offense, one felony, something of that nature, or juvenile records, which still show up even for adults here in Delaware. They have a very, very hard time understanding why all these charges, they say, I wasn't guilty of that. Why are employers seeing this? I pled out to a misdemeanor. Why are they still seeing the felony? And they can't grasp it. And to the employer, who also doesn't know how to read a background check very well, it looks like they're lying. Because I applied for a job. I say I've never been convicted of a felony, which is true. I pled out to a misdemeanor. But they see felony charges. And employers say, oh, well, they lied. They're out. and providing someone one free background check like you do a credit report, it would at least let people know what they're up against. Because there's a lot of people in Delaware who don't even know they have criminal records. So another barrier is fingerprinting is only available in 3 locations: the SBI office in Dover, right across from Blue Hen, Thurman Adams down in Georgetown, and Troop 2 up in Newcastle. For pardon hearings, they're held once a month, and they are always in Dover at the Kent County Superior Court. They used to go up to Newcastle, but they haven't done that in a long time. And I know Dom has spoke about, she's up in Newcastle, so it's more of a barrier for her individuals and a barrier for some of my people who are lower Sussex, getting to Dover. If you already have transportation issues, you got to take off the whole day of work to make sure you catch the bus, to make sure you got your hearing in time. If they bounced around those pardon hearings, I think Dom said that would be helpful to her individuals in Newcastle. The fingerprinting, enable a mobile SBI van for fingerprinting. And when I started in 2012, SBI did come out and do fingerprinting mobily. They did it once or twice, and then they didn't do it again. It would be great is if they could park that van when we're doing office hours in front of the library, or if they could park at Department of Labor where we are all the time, that'd be wonderful. But it would be really great for expungement clinics. Right now, when we do expungement clinics, we have ODS there, we have the Public Defender's Office there, Apex is there, Department of Labor is there. We even have sometimes a representative from Delgis there, but we don't have SBI. And SBI is the first step to getting either one of these processes started. So that would be wonderful. Creating a fingerprint location in Wilmington, actually inside the city would be great. And then rotate pardon hearings between the 3 counties.
Do you know any idea why they stopped the SBI van fingerprinting?
I have no idea. I don't know. Appreciate it. And they have done it mobily. We did one expungement clinic up at Wilmington, and they were printing off SBI reports for people in there, but it's difficult. Maybe it's an hours thing. I'm not really positive, but I know they have the ability to do it, and I know a van would be really helpful to us.
Representative, it's Lisa Menutolo. If I can just add in, SBI has been at the last several clinics that we've done, but it's SBI officials who can give information, but they didn't have the ability to do the fingerprinting at those expungement clinics. And if they were able to do that fingerprinting at those clinics, it will be helpful. When I first started working on expungements, we did a juvenile expungement clinic at Troop 2 where they did the fingerprinting right then and there. It worked very smoothly, but again, we had the issue of getting clients down to Troop 2 from Wilmington. So, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, when I first started in 2012, I think they did the fingerprints for us at DENREC. So they came out to us just to do like a big event, but we were never able to get them to do it, to print them right there again. The other recommendations we have here, limitations on who qualifies. This is kind of what Liza spoke about earlier. If I get arrested for multiple misdemeanors on one day, if I wait the amount of time specified, I can skip the year and a half, 2 long-year-old pardon process, and I can go straight for expungement. If I spread my misdemeanors out over 2 days, I'm into the pardon process a lot of times. Just changing that to allow, I'll read exactly how it's been. Amend the adult expungement statute to allow individuals with multiple non-violent misdemeanors to become eligible for an expungement or a pardon after X amount of years. And it should say expungement there because you are eligible for a pardon. Misdemeanors become eligible for an expungement. And we used X amount of years because we don't know what that year that everybody would feel comfortable with. And then automatically expunge old pending charges or treat them as nully prosecuted, not guilty. So again, something that not a lot of people know is, I want to say maybe 2000s or 90s, they transferred documents from paper documents to computer. And a lot of people, now I want to specify a lot of people who had charges in the early 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, all have mistakes on their record. Stuff is listed as pending that hasn't been pending for 30 years. Stuff is listed as unknown. Stuff is listed as transferred, and you can't find out which court it's been transferred to. And when someone comes up against that, The pardon board won't accept their application until you fix it, and the expungement courts won't accept the application until you fix it. The ways to fix it is either go to the court, have them contact the archive records, and dig through all the old film to find these old court records, if they can, to update SBI, or contact the AG's office or Delgis directly and see if they'll just dismiss the charges. The easiest one is the latter, and it happens often. I see someone who has an unknown charge is keeping them from getting eligible for the expungement. I contact Delgis reaches out to the AG's office, and the AG dismisses the charge because it was 40 years old and no one's finding that court record anymore. So there's no way of knowing what actually happened. By just automatically viewing everything that's old, listed as unknown or not guilty, it would cut out the middleman and all the footwork of making the court staff waste time to go through all the court records, wasting the archive people's time, wasting Delgis's time, for what ultimately just has the charges dismissed by the AG's office anyway. Does anyone have any questions for Liza, Dom, or myself?
I guess my just general question I had was about, I guess, the like referral process, or how are individuals from the community informed about your programs and services?
So at this point, we've been able to gather several partners that are privy to our process. We do a ton of outreach now virtually. So myself, if anyone is interested in becoming a client of our program, especially in the Newcastle County area, the referrals can be sent to us via email, even simply texting, calling, whatever the case is. Once we receive the referral, we schedule them for a one-on-one, either one-on-one orientation, or myself, I do 2 large group orientations every month. Same with Andrew, just reaching out. We're very accessible. We try to be as accessible as possible. So it's just a matter of reaching out, and then from there, we'll go through that intake process and move forward.
So thank you. Are there any additional questions from members of the subcommittee?
Hello, Representative. This is James Sherrod. I was having a little computer problem. We couldn't get in earlier, but I'm just like a general question. I'd like to know, how are the businesses being approached as far as accepting people who have been released? And is there any interaction with those businesses to try to work out a plan so that the reentry and employment issue gets to be less of a burden? The other issue is, how about the medical profession? You have a number of requirements for psychiatric evaluations, et cetera. Does the medical profession provide some of these on a free basis? Or what? I mean, it appears to me that they could at least add something to that where they would not charge individual. I did see that the issue of Medicare and things of that nature being a problem, but I'm thinking to interact with the medical profession and work out a program whereby they could in fact provide services free of charge. Those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
So for the first one, Dominique spoke a little bit briefly about it. We had just hired 2 new individuals, and they hopefully will be like a liaison for people who come to Apex and try to work with them to find employment or better employment as they go through the pardon and expungement process. Because one of the things is a pardon can take a year to 2 years, depending on when you apply and how backlogged they are. So this person will hopefully be able to help them get into job training, help them find someplace to work in the meantime until the record gets cleaned up and opens up more opportunities. The medical psych eval, that would be amazing. And maybe that's something we should definitely look into. It's nothing that I've ever tried to look into before, finding if someone could provide it for free from like the big medical body.
That's a good point too. And if anyone has any information that they could offer to us that could, help support our clients, that would really be beneficial as well. There's a doctor that we often refer a lot of our clients to. There was someone down in Dover. And I know there's other agencies that offer the psychological evaluations. If I'm not mistaken, oftentimes they have to meet a criteria, or oftentimes they already have to be a client, an active client with the agency. So there may be certain stipulations. I recently did an orientation a few days ago, And although she was one of our clients or potential clients, she explained to us how she literally just opened this medical practice in Delaware and offered to support, and provide those services to anyone that was an Apex client or anyone that needed the psychological evaluation for the purpose of a pardon. So just simply building those relationships in that matter is still beneficial. So we're always open to whatever support or information so we can share that accordingly. So, and like Andrew was saying, sir, you were asking about the employer engagement. That's all that really matters here. You know what I mean? 9 times out of 10, someone is looking to clear their record to secure employment, to obtain that gainful, steady employment. So it is crucial that we have those relationships with the entities that are willing to open the doors and give these individuals a second chance. Sometimes they do the background checks. They don't understand how to even accurately read the background check. You know what I mean? It causes red flag because they see several charges. So if we can engage with those employers, which again, in our agency, that is our goal, is to have these individuals that just started with our program to serve as the liaison, to show up to these companies, to advocate on behalf of the client. We can say we've already helped clear the client's record. Now let's, come up with the systems to help get them into your doors for employment. And then, that's full service right there. That's the goal. That's the ultimate goal. So a lot is in the making. Speaking again, just on myself and Andrew, we've been doing this, like I keep saying, for some time, and it was only the 2 of us. And I think we all know how it is when we're working, you're doing the work. But once we finally have this team and we're able to collaborate with other partners, now we can kind of look at this in a holistic view and just on a macro level and see, okay, there was even barriers existing in our services. There were things that we could have expanded on, or now we have the capacity to do it. So I'm personally excited about that because we can grow, we can evolve, we can offer those wraparound services. But it was, again, it was crucial to have that support. It's crucial to even have these connections with ODS, with DCJ, with your agency. So this is where it starts. And now we can have the conversations of expanding these services, expanding that support. And I digress.
I'd like to just add 2 other things that I think are helpful. One is after the Apex team does an amazing job of helping many of their clients get a pardon, that the work doesn't end there, because if that person goes and applies for a job, their criminal background check will say pardoned, if there are, say, 3 convictions on there. So that person still needs to go ahead and file a petition for discretionary expungement. So that can add another 6 months to this process to truly clear your record. So that's why it's helpful to have these partnerships, because as soon as Dom and Andrew help someone get a pardon, they can say, call Eliza and I can help with the discretionary expungement petition. The other thing, as part of holistic defense that I talked about earlier with the Office of Defense Services, we're fortunate enough to have Partners for Justice, which are recent college graduates who commit 2 years to work with us, and they're called our client advocates. We do a lot of referrals to them because they can help with housing and employment. And so they've actually started, and other public benefits, they have a roster of different employers who are willing to accept individuals who have criminal background checks. And in some cases, they're such great advocates. They'll say, listen, we're going through the process to help clear this person's record, but could you at least help set up an interview and let them try at least to get housing or a job? So as part of this holistic defense, we're trying different angles to really try to help people get that second chance that they need and deserve.
Thank you. And thank you all for the presentation. Are there any additional questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, again, I thank you all for the information. Appreciate the presentation as well as providing the PowerPoint so we've shared it with our members. And in addition, the recommendations as we're transitioning our committee's work into recommendations so that we can present to the full African American Task Force. Your recommendations would be very helpful. And most likely in the next few weeks, I'll be reaching out to you just to try to walk through them and get some clarity myself on a couple of them. But again, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you all. Our next agenda item is just a discussion and some Q&A as we begin to transition from our meetings, standing meetings, and then going forward to meetings and discussion, having a meeting discussion on our recommendations that will be presented to the full body. Our full body will be accepting recommendations and will be presented on at the April 11th meeting of the full African American Task Force. So between now and then, what we want to do is to review all of our meetings, all of our presentations that were provided from our various presenters and guests, and to begin to summarize some of the things that we've heard throughout our meetings and begin to just formalize our recommendations that we would like to put forward. And I think it's along this process, again, a lot of it I see entailing going back to some of our presenters, just trying to clarify and to ensure that we understand what they're asking for, how we can support them and put their recommendations into either a legislative form or a policy change request, and to ensure even in terms of funding support in some of the areas that were mentioned today about limited staff and the need for additional resources and support in order to effectively to have the outcome and impact that we really want in terms of providing these support services. So I welcome any input now from members of the subcommittee in terms of ways in which they would like to be involved in, or if there's an area in particular that they would like to, from our presenters, that they would like to be the point person on, I would welcome that as well. But what I am trying to go forward, I'm thinking a date before the April 11th meeting. There was, I believe, the last Monday in March, last Friday, I'm sorry, the 25th, March the 25th, to have that as a possible date for our next meeting where we would discuss possible our recommendations as a subcommittee. Any feedback from members of the group?
I have feedback.
Yes, Gilmore.
How are you?
Well, sir.
It's great hearing 3 more programs that are all out there working on this stuff. And so I think part of the recommendation should be figuring out how to support all these things that already exist. But anyway, I won't be available on the 25th.
Okay.
And I do have a small list of recommendations. Can I just email them to you?
Yes, that will be great. And again, I was trying to select that date to give us some time to do some work next month, but absolutely. And I'm more than welcome, and even welcome the opportunity to sit down with you and review those recommendations so ensure that we have them accurately to present to the full group.
Cool. I'll send them to you today.
Excellent. Thank you, Gilmore.
My pleasure.
Also, in terms of voting on these recommendations, today we have not met a quorum, so we can't approve the meeting minutes.
Yes.
But it would be really important next meeting for us to, reach a quorum. So if people are maybe aware that they can't make it, you can consider sending a proxy. I know we've done it for other subcommittees, so I just wanted to bring that up.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chelsea. Are there any additional comments from members of the committee in terms of the discussion regarding the recommendations? Thank you. Seeing none, again, I would present that date, and hopefully we can have staff send that date out, and we can try to secure that date for our next meeting. And as was noted, if members can't make it, then hopefully we can inform them that they can send a proxy, especially with that being one of our last meetings before the final recommendations will be presented to the full African American Task Force. So thank everyone for that. And I will now go to our next agenda item. We'll open up for public comment. If there are individuals who are on the call who would like to make a public comment, you can use the raise hands function on Zoom and indicate that you would like to make a public comment. Public comment can also be emailed to African American Task Force at delaware.gov as well.
I don't see any raised hands, so there is nobody making public comment.
I appreciate it. Thank you. So we will now move forward with our closing. I would like to, again, thank everyone for their participation in the Safety and Justice Subcommittee today. Really appreciate everyone's involvement in justice work. And I'm really looking forward to, again, transitioning to this point and seeing what our recommendations can be. All of our presenters have been very thoughtful and really helped me greatly to understand a lot of the challenges that deal with reentry, as well as community-based violence and gun violence. We've had mental health issues presented repeatedly from many of our presenters. So looking at the challenges that are presented and how they will just manifest inside our recommendations to try to bring forth sustainable change on these issues and to impact the crime and justice and safety and justice areas for African Americans throughout our state. So again, I thank everyone for their participation. I greatly appreciate it. And if there are no additional comments, I will accept the motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
It's been a motion and second.